I love being here so much. It's starting to feel like my home. And I would consider this a great privilege in my life, to be in a room with leaders like all of you, and to be working with Anne and Lori and Sarah and Hallie and everybody here with the Ascend team. 18 years ago, I was newly pregnant, and I'm old now, but that was a long time ago. And because of my last name, my husband and I started receiving tons of free gear and equipment for our new baby from well-intentioned companies. And as the daughter of a social worker, one paycheck away from needing services ourselves, I knew that all of these free things that we were receiving needed to go to homes where they would be used and not to people who could afford them. And so babies grow very quickly, we all know that, and there was a car seat sitting in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I kicked it as a newborn baby was crying in the next room, and I nearly broke my toe and decided I needed to do something in the world with the excess that exists and create a pipeline to families in need. And so I asked my friends who had children already, and they said it's just sitting in my closet, this stuff, or it's sitting in storage. And all of us in New York City know that if you have stuff in closets in New York City, and you're it's not good. So I started what I thought was a one-time donation drive. We called it Baby Buggy, which is a very simple name for basically we pick up your stuff. You come, you give us your stuff, and we deliver it to programs who will use it. And while I'm still standing here, we were quite successful in doing that. And once again, I know very well what social workers need to make their jobs easier, which are tools. And so we took our tools, we took our cribs and our strollers and our diapers and our clothing and our blankets and our books and everything that New Yorkers and Angelinos gave us so generously, and we paired them with transformational services of the highest quality organizations that we could find. And our social workers used them to grow their programs, to get people to show up, to incentivize their customers, to understand that people care about them, and understand that when you show up week after week, you are creating a pathway for your own success and that of your children. And so our purpose was to make programs better, to make lives of social workers and providers easier, but of course, ultimately, to help parents. And so year after year, we would, check our data and look at our numbers, and we would notice year after year that we were working primarily with single mothers. And that felt right, but it also gave us pause and gave us a reason to ask ourselves hard questions and educate ourselves about men. And we would talk to our program leaders and ask them what their experience with men was, dads, co-parents. And we heard, as Dr. Richard Besser said yesterday, we heard the same thing over and over again. The men are there for the most part. They just don't know what to do. They are lost and they are not engaged, but they were there. We saw them. We saw them in lobbies. We saw them in waiting rooms, but they did seem lost. And so we thought this was a moment for us to really pay attention to something that we couldn't see in any of the programs we were working with. And a deep scan across the country, we didn't see a lot of work in fatherhood. And this was in 2010 when we formally decided that it was time for this organization to put a stake in the ground with men and with fathers, because we really feel that people have a relationship to that word father, whether you had a father, whether you had a father figure, you do know that that role plays an important part of your life, whether it was filled or not. And we wanted to address it. But the men we started to work with were confronting challenges that are intergenerational and systemic. And the men grew up in an environment of complete instability, violence, trauma, incarceration, and had failed over and over again, most likely, and had certainly seen their own fathers, if they had one, do the same. And so this vortex of poverty is just, it's reinforcing a storyline that men have heard over and over again, which is that they're not worthy of being fathers. And we have just seen it too many times that then they just stop trying. And I think we have all seen the research that, for the most part, children are better off if there is a father in their lives in some way. Or in Lori and Anthony's case, they've beat the odds and they've had a third generation to back them up and to cover them. And this is, as we've talked about over the past 36 hours, a really important part of childcare and family life is this third generation that cover for these dads that aren't there. And so, you know, when you're living at the poverty line or below, as many of our families are in this room, it's hard to show up for another class on parenting or healthy relationships or anger management and job and vocational training, which is what our programs are all about. And I see Daniel, who hopefully you all saw yesterday, who's been in our Good Plus family for many years, and you have seen the work that we do, and we've seen the work that you've been doing, and you are a perfect example of how we work together in making it worthwhile to show up for your class and being able to take home all the things that you need to create a home for your child, so your child will maybe choose you instead of mom because you're showing up and you're providing, which is something mom hasn't seen before. And so it's been revelatory for us to watch men get more access to their children and to be able to spend more time with their children, and to watch that dynamic change where dad can bring mom along to a baseball game that will provide, or to something that men have never been empowered, these men have never been empowered to do before because they were lost in a sea of failure. And then they come to a class at Strive or a Center for Urban Families or so many of our other incredible programs that are doing the most amazing work. And they create a brotherhood, and they create a family for themselves that they never had before. And they're with people that have failed, and they're with people who understand them, and it's the only social capital they might even have at that point. And that is helping them look at the world full of possibilities. So we're just one small organization, and this job, fatherhood, tackling father absence, requires collaboration. The men that we work with have dealt with unimaginable trauma in their lives, and it goes untreated pretty much. In this country, we aren't addressing trauma holistically. And the child support laws that we run up against every single day, they're based on an outmoded version of the nuclear family from many, many years ago. So they asked me to be here today to introduce one of my heroes who we're working with. You're our spiritual leader, you're our friend, you're our mentor. And we love working with you, Joe Jones, and we love working with you, Ascend, and we love working with the Western Poverty Law Center, and we love working with the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, Kim Dent, who was at our fatherhood convening. Because we are so steadfast in our belief in fatherhood, we've now required all of our partners who receive grants from us to engage fathers in a really important and significant way, because that's, we believe, if you're working with mothers and children, fathers are worth engaging. Fatherhood is cultural, it's societal, it's familial, it's spiritual, and it's seminal. And this work, like I said, is collaborative, and it's going to take a room full of people like all of you and the leaders I'm about to present to keep us on this path moving forward. So thanks for your time. Wendy Ellis is going to come up in a second. She is from Building Community Resilience Collaborative at George Washington University. She's helping communities find new ways to address adverse childhood experiences in the smartest way. I'm so impressed with you, Wendy, and we're so happy that you've come on board to our working group with mental health and trauma. And Kwame Anku, you're here. Yes. He's the co-founder of the Black Angel Tech Fund, which is funding startups for women in leadership roles and all diverse leaders across the globe doing amazing things. And Aisha Ndoro, who was sitting behind me, and I heard you yassing on a lot of things that Yolanda was saying, so I can't wait to hear what you say. CEO of Springboard to Opportunities, which is helping families that live in affordable housing reach their goals in school, work, and life, because everyone in this room knows if you don't have housing, there are no goals and there are no dreams. So, my man, Joe Jones, come on up here. You're my hero. You're our long-term partner, and you have spent decades with the Center for Urban Families helping parents and fathers find economic opportunities. Worship you. Thank you all.
How's everybody doing? So first of all, let me thank Jessica for lying. But I really appreciate the sentiments, and I can't tell you how impactful it is to have Jessica lend her voice and the voice of the Good Plus Foundation to that, and to Alan Michael Graves, man, for all the work that you did in LA, and for the shrewd move they made to bring you onto the Good Plus team. Yeah. Leadership is about making bold decisions, right? But I do want to acknowledge, I might embarrass Aspen a little bit because I have to acknowledge I'm a part of a gang. It's called the Aspen Fellows Gang. Last night, the three cohorts, representatives of the three cohorts got together over dinner, and this is how I knew we were a gang, because when each group introduced themselves, we did different grunts, and little gang signs went up, right? But I also have to test you all on your parental acumen. How many folks in here have little people at home under 7 years of age? And how many people in here are grandparents who have little people around under 7 years of age? Okay, so this is going to be your test. So the only two parts to this test. That's one. And here's the other one. And I need you to react. Y'all better roll. All right, some of y'all passed and some didn't. Okay, all right. This is supposed to be the Aspen Forum on children and families, right? Y'all coming weak. All right, I only got a few minutes, so let me go ahead and get started, right? So I got this big idea, right? And my big idea is to, relative to children and families, and in this 2-gen space, is to not diminish, not to minimize, not to reduce, not to disrupt poverty, but it is to dismantle poverty, right? My team and I, we wrestled with this space that we were in when we were talking about disrupting poverty, and ultimately we decided to. If you think about a drug organization, forgive my reliance on drug organizations and gangs, right? But if the police simply come and disrupt them, right? They just reassemble someplace else, right? So we want to dismantle that drug organization, and we want to dismantle poverty. So our whole, if you ask us what our mission is, I can tell you what our mission statement is, but our mantra is to dismantle poverty. And we want to do that in concert with what we call economically aspiring fathers and families, right? And my few minutes together with you today, I'm only gonna have 2 slides and I'm gonna talk about some stuff, right? And so Jessica, a few minutes ago, talked about the declarative statement that Good Plus made to require all of their partners to emphatically engage fathers. They used to ask, how do you do it? Now it's a must, right? Timestamp. Go back to when I first started doing this work in the mid-1990s at the Baltimore City Health Department. So I'm in public health, and I'm working in the Bureau of Maternal and Child Health. And our focus was to reduce infant mortality. So our goal, one of our primary goals or strategies was to identify every pregnancy in the community of Sandtown, Winchester originally, and then it went citywide, right? And so as we engaged those women, I said, well, you know, these women are pregnant, and they're pregnant by somebody, right? And so I went back to the health department to basically say, hey, we should think about engaging dads as a part of our strategy to reduce infant mortality. And they looked at me, they didn't say this, but literally you could have said that. They said, well, who are dads? What are dads? Right? Fast forward, when Jessica was mentioning Good Plus Foundation made this declarative statement that fathers have to be intentionally included in their strategies with their partners going forward, they then went back to existing partners, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, and a third of their partners decided that they could, for various reasons, not continue to be a partner if they had to engage dads, right? One of the partners actually said, we don't have dads in our community, am I right? Yeah. This is 2000, that was 2018, right? So we're still in this space where in terms of social welfare policy and programming, the notion of how we include dads is really, we're so far away from where we need to be. So my first slide is this. Oh, okay. Thank you, thank you. Okay. So, ho, 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 ho. This is not the slide. Oh, okay. I could literally just not do anything else, and we just could absorb that slide for the time that I have, right? But you get my drift when we talk about this missing urban infrastructure. Fathers are left out of the equation. So as much as we will try to make families and communities and children whole, we're missing out on our ability to make sure that kids, our children, are surrounded by and have an identity that's connected to both parents. And moms and dads play this complementary role in raising our nation's children. And we know it's ideal if children can grow up in a 2-parent household, but that's not the reality for every family type. So part of our strategy has to be for those who don't decide to be together in a household, married or unmarried, and for those who don't decide to stay together romantically, we still have to figure out what are the tools and techniques we're going to use to work with those non-resident, non-romantic couples to help them focus on their child so the children are consistently engaged with their parents. And so for us, our big idea also impacts, policy challenges. So for that, let me give you a story. This is Raheem and Keisha, right? Raheem and Keisha go to the public welfare system because they need temporary assistance, temporary benefits, and the system says, Raheem, Keisha, you have to give us the information around Raheem in order to receive these public benefits if you all don't live together. And the system will automatically send him the child support, right? The amount of child support debt that is an anchor around the neck of low-income dads is something that they literally will never, ever be able to pay off, right, in most instances. And I'm talking about child support debt. So one of the things that we did was to engage with our child support office and the guys in the community. We sat down at the table with them and we co-designed an intervention that will allow the guys to participate in services at the program, and in lieu of paying on the debt, they could pay their regular child support order, right? And at the end of the day, if they owe $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 over a 2-year period, they could get that entire debt wiped away, right? That model has now gotten passed over to our state legislature in the form of another bill, House Bill 1502, the Step Up program, that is now a citywide pilot based off of us engaging guys in the community to develop this model. Now, the last thing that I will say, and this is, 2Gen includes men, right? That's the campaign, right? And what I want to leave you with is, how do we do this in a way that is based on respect and dignity, and we don't allow systems to strip the income. We don't allow them to strip the dignity from folks. So if that's child support, that is, not student loans from proprietary schools that don't have a job or career on the back end, and the debt can never be repaid. Parole and probation that pays fees. Redlining by the auto insurance industry, where we can help a person get a car, but they can't afford the auto insurance, right? And one of the things that we did with the families that we're working with to help advance them is we said to the ABLE Foundation, a local foundation in Baltimore, as these families move economically and they get to a place where they now are in a position to think about stable housing, including home ownership, the ABLE Foundation has created a fund for us that is for home ownership financing assistance. Each family can access $10,000 in a grant, not a loan, right, to become homeowners. So this young man and his wife and their children are in the pipeline to be the next family to get a home ownership grant, so that they can move into their own home consistent with their economic ability to be there. And I wanted to leave you with that because 2Gen does include men. Right?
So I have the unenviable position. I need my slides. Let's get this right. Following my brother from another mother, cohort 3, Aspen Ascend Fellows, to talk about building community resilience, collaborative, and proudly networks now, after 4.5 years of work. Well, I've heard the word dismantle, disrupt used quite often here, and so I want to, before I start this, just to really hit a level set as far as what we mean by community resilience, first off. So resilience, number one, I am not applying a term from physics to the human spirit, nor am I applying that to our communities. When we talk about resilience and the building community resilience work, otherwise known as BCR, we are talking about providing communities the buffers and supports to not only bounce back from adversity, but to also bounce forward. And so we are with intent harnessing the power of collaboration with community across sectors to really address what are the sources of adversity in our community as they vary from community to community. And so we are applying what seems to be a very simple process. In fact, when I first designed this and presented it to some folks, they said, well, this looks like Public Health 101. Perhaps it is, but why aren't we doing it if it's that simple? And so what we do in building community resilience is work with our community partners as well as with sectors, major systems, to create a shared understanding. When we talk about adversity in Milwaukee, in Missouri, in Texas, what does that look like? And what are the voices? What's the narrative of adversity? What's the narrative of hope in our community? And then working very systematically to determine what's our state of readiness to address these things, but not just looking at it from a deficit model, but what are those supports and buffers that are already in place that we can build upon? as we go through this process, it's very readily available to begin to understand who needs to be at the table. So I gave yesterday in talking to Jessica about our work, I have a grandmother who loved to throw fabulous dinner parties. And she would rotate her guests, and she always had an eye to and an ear to, we want to have different voices at the table. Who's going to foster the engaging the engaging conversation? Who's going to spark new ideas? Who's going to bring something to the table that maybe doesn't normally get invited to these types of parties? And so that's exactly what BCR does. We create room at the table for the unlikely suspects to be at the table, to input their story, their narrative, but most importantly, to help in the co-creation of these solutions, not just stay on the narrative of adversity, but what we can build upon. Again, flipping fear to hope, turning hope into something that is actionable. And so with that is necessary to have the community a voice. So one of the things we've heard, and I want to be really clear about, I've started using this bug to communicate why we talk about equity in this work, is because, as you've heard a number of speakers over the last 2 days talk about equity or inequity, we know that inequity in itself is the underlying stressor that leads to so much adversity and trauma in our communities. And without equity, you can't hope for resilience. And so these two concepts of trauma and resilience are inextricably tied to equity. So we cannot do this work without putting equity in the center. And so that's why we're being very intentional by doing so with this very simple bug. So what's the problem that we're trying to solve? We're going backwards. Okay, pretend like you don't see any of this. Okay, it is, man. I don't play Fortnite or video games or anything of that nature, so I'm like, what is happening here? All right. 1, dimples. 2, what's the problem that we're trying to solve, folks? So I created this visual a couple years ago when I first started working with communities across the country. We particularly started with child health systems and trying to find ways to communicate what we call the pair of ACEs. And so when we're talking about system-driven outcomes, typically what we've talked about when we talk about ACEs, though, are we've just talked about the branches and the leaves on that tree. So we've talked about the things, whether that is maternal depression, emotional and sexual abuse, a child that's fidgety in class because they've been exposed to unstable environments, maybe it's because of their parents' substance abuse. Much like the trees that we see in our forest on the streets, we can judge the health of that tree by the vibrancy of the green on the leaves, the strength of the branches. That helps us give us an idea of how strong that tree may be. Is it a tree that I'm going to let my kid go and climb up into because it looks like it can hold my kid, or are the branches going to break? Similarly, if we apply that to a community context, we can see where we have areas of concentrated poverty that are associated with concentrated disparate outcomes with regard to substance abuse, domestic violence. Those things are feeding into the soil or being fed by the soil. And those things aren't usually discussed when we talk about ACEs. And I think it's important for us to think about adversity, not just what's happening to the individual, but the context in which this is occurring. And so that flips the script, because we're not just talking about programs and practice. We're talking about policy that drives these adverse community environments. So you will never hear me talk about community resilience in the framework of talking about social determinants of health, because the way that we have framed the conversation around social determinants of health have come back to pointing to individuals and the outcomes that are associated with individuals and the social determinants. So instead, I'm reframing that as systems-driven community characteristics, because it helps us to understand that we're not necessarily saying that individuals aren't responsible, they don't have some level of responsibility. But we have to also understand that systems have responsibility. Systems have responsibility for the outcomes that we see in our communities, which then lead to the outcomes that we see, or associated with the outcomes that we see in individuals. So taking in that context, understanding that we can't just focus on the outcomes, we have to also focus on the policy and the practice. So, I keep skipping. I want to go. Okay. So, through that, the power of collaboration, we work with 5 sites across the country. Here in Washington, D.C., a multi-state site in Missouri that spans into Kansas as well as into southern Illinois, the entire state of Oregon. We've got a multi-city network in Texas. And here in Washington, D.C., we are now DM because Joe has joined our work from Baltimore, and we're hopefully expanding into Virginia this year to be the DMV. To really think about how do we change practice and programs on the ground that take in this reframing. So here in DC, you heard my fellow cohort member, Matt Beal, talk about his work that's going on in Georgetown MedStar to change practice so that you're treating the 2-gen, treating the family, treating that child in the context of the family, and understanding the community determinants that are affecting the outcomes that we see in a clinical environment, but also thinking about, from a governmental perspective, the policy network that we do. So we do a lot of work with regard to policy and working on the DC ACEs task force to really infuse this understanding of this context consideration into government policy. So with that, as I said, when we look at systems change, we're not, again, just looking at how we change practice within a system. We're looking at the policies that drive that. And so our work really does focus on that being very deliberate when we apply this process to, when we talk about the narrative of the community, being explicit with regard to understanding the effects of structural racism. I have another slide that I use in a lot of my talks, and you can find it on our website, that really goes through explicitly understanding not only 240 plus years of policy, social and criminal policy, that leads to the outcomes that we see, but that's on top of 400-year history of subjugation. We are in 2019. It was in 1619 that the first slaves arrived in Virginia. So when people tell us that slavery was something that was in the past, it has no effect on today's future, and you look at that policy timeline and you see that we've been building upon this structural racism over the entire course of our history. And it's been with intent, despite Dr. Sharif's assertion earlier that perhaps this isn't, it's just naivete rather than malice. I would say our history shows clearly it was with intent and with malice. And so just as you wouldn't expect a physician to treat obesity without weighing the patient, or to treat blood pressure without treat high blood pressure without taking the patient's blood pressure, we cannot build equity without being explicit about structural racism. The big ideas, this isn't an effort of anger. This is an effort of honesty. This is an effort of healing. And we bring the parties together to understand that in order to disrupt the cycles that you talk about, we have to be deliberate in our design. And our redesign comes with the power of collaboration across communities, across sectors, and with lived experience.
All right, good afternoon. How's everybody? Okay, so I work in the industry of technology, but I'm not that good at technology. So I mean, see, yeah. So y'all are being so patient, and we love you for that. Okay. So can somebody, Hallie, here, our resident tech support, we'll get it together. Yeah, thank you. And she was so kind to say, use the gold one. There we go. Oh, okay. Okay, there we go. Yeah, let's go back to. Can you have me back to? We are almost there, Joe. Where's Hallie when we need her? She's behind the glass. This is not cutting into my 8 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so yes. Okay, almost there. There we go. All right, beautiful. All right, we're ready. All right, so let's just, if you don't mind, let's switch gears just a little bit for some energy change. Is that okay? Okay, so grab the hand of the person next to you both if you got somebody on either side. There you go. There you go. All right. Okay. Hey, folks, I got 8 minutes. All right. All right, beautiful. Let's take a deep breath in, inhale, and then let's exhale together. Oh, that's nice. Let's inhale, and let's exhale together. And one more time, let's inhale, and then let's exhale together. And then keep those hands together, and I want you to repeat after me. I want you to say, we are connected. We are one. The time is now. Oh, that's beautiful. All right. Good, good. Ooh, yes. All right, quickly. So I'll tell you a little about who I am, what I do, and what my big idea is. The reason why I've got a picture of my beautiful son, Elijah Kojo Dara Anku, who now today is actually 10 years old. That was the day he was born. He is my pride and joy, my raison d'etre, and everything that I do and the work that I do. Yes, we want to affect millions of people all over the planet, but what drives me every day is this kid. And I'm very fortunate to stand here with you today because about 6 years ago, I was in the emergency room. I had acute bilateral pneumonia, went into septic shock, and they told my family I had about 12 hours left to live. And in a very dark space where I didn't have any breath, I didn't have a heartbeat, I remember being in a black space, and all I was thinking about was making it through to be a father to this kid. And he's 10, and let's look at the next slide. We can move for me, thanks, Joe. So this is him now. Yes, I'm the father of a Starbucks model and and a kid who thinks he's Black Panther. He'll come in my room and go, "Papa, Wakanda forever." I was like, "Son, we live in Sacramento." And then one more, you see us together. All right, beautiful, beautiful. So I just share that because I just understand the blessing of the moment, and I carry him with me everywhere that I go. So that's a little bit about the background. In terms of what I do, I'm the founder and CEO of a micro venture capital fund that's called the Black Star Fund. I was actually the original co-founder of Black Angel Tech Fund, which gave me the stepping stone to what I do now. And we are looking to fund on the for-profit technology investment side diverse founders of color. And my journey into this started way back when I was at Stanford, but in the immediate history, I started, believe it or not, working with the rock star Prince. And in 2000, about 2013, I had an opportunity to start to work with him and be part of an organization that was co-created by Prince and Van Jones called Yes We Code. Now that was born out of the Trayvon Martin tragedy. Some of you know that story, where Prince was at home watching television and saw where Trayvon's murderer was set free and he was acquitted. And Prince asked the question, why is it that when we see these African-American men wearing hoodies that we think they're criminals and thugs, but when we can see a young white guy wearing a hoodie out in Silicon Valley, we can think maybe that's the next Mark Zuckerberg. And he said, we need to do something about that. Where are the Zuckerbergs? Where are they? So he planted a seed in our head around the idea of the innovation economy. And those of us that have historically been left out, cut out, marginalized, or quite frankly, never thought about it, what if we were leading it? Right? Not just getting jobs at Google, right? But what if we were creating the next Google? Now, this resonated with a group of us who went to Stanford because we went to school with the folks that created Google and Yahoo and PayPal and Palantir and was the incubator for Facebook, right? We were there. But we never thought to ourselves, what would it look like if we were not only those founders, but what would it look like if we were aggregating the dollars to be the investors, right? Because we're excited when we see these big exits of technology companies, but think about the folks who got in early to invest in those companies. So we started on that journey with the Black Angel Tech Fund. In that fund, 80% of our portfolio were African-American women. Now, it was not a women-focused fund, but the portfolio was 80%. So I heard the question earlier when someone was asking, well, how do we get these corporations to do the right thing? How do we get them to start to change some of their internal practices? I love what my friend, Dr. Wendy Ellis just said. It's about what's the intent. What is the intent? What if we were creating new technology companies and the intent was to have them founded by and funded by, in a lot of cases, folks of color? What do you think would happen? I'll give you an example. One of our partners is an incredible woman named Mary Spio. Mary Spio is a Ghanaian woman. She was actually born in New York but raised in Ghana. She has created a virtual reality company that I believe will be at the level of a Google or a Facebook or an Apple in probably the next 2 years. Okay, that's what I know and I believe. Now, do you think we're going to have conversations with her about gender diversification of her board? Do Do you think we're gonna have to do training so she can have a more diverse C-suite? No. Now, while that's happening, I can tell you, and this is kind of the exciting good news, I'm part of a movement. Just yesterday in New York City was an incredible meeting of Black women in tech. These are the top leaders in the tech industry that happen to be women of color. These are folks who are looking to aggregate hundreds of millions of dollars to fund early stage technology companies. Now, my big idea is something I call 100 by 100. And the idea is a vision of 100 Black and African fund managers who are managing $100 million innovation funds. Now, how does that tie back to the work? It ties back to the work because we're talking about transforming communities. What happens in the Bay is a technology company will get $5 million, come in, have all their offices, have all their employees who are making six-figure incomes come into the neighborhood, push everybody out. We call that gentrification. But let's go back to Dr. Ellis's point about intent. What if the founder went into that community and said, we're putting our headquarters in East Oakland. We're putting our headquarters in Harlem. We're putting our headquarters in East St. Louis. And the people we're not running the people out. The people are going to work for the company. Now, we're going to bring some other folks in who might have some of the talent that we need, but then they're going to be working side by side, right? And so that way we're talking about uplifting communities, transforming communities, different images that these young men will have to see of what it means to be a man, to be a father, to be a provider. All of those things can happen, and we're talking about en masse and at a massive scale. So that is the work that I do, and although it's in the venture space, understand that I operate, as you can see, in the 2Gen framework in my own life, right? And I'm committed and passionate about seeing these transformations around a model of hyper acceleration. That is, Wendy said, it's a 400-year journey for some of us, and we can't wait another 400 years or another 100 years. So I believe that this process of aggregating $10 billion to invest in early stage innovative companies that will ultimately transform communities and create wealth in a completely different flow of capital will be one of the key answers to solving this problem, and will be a phenomenal driver and support system for the work that each and every one of you do. Thank you.
All right. No, technology, and we're going to win because of that. Good afternoon. I am Aisha Yanduro, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of Springboard to Opportunities. Springboard works directly with families who live in federally subsidized affordable housing. Our goal is to help these families reach their dreams in life, school, and work. As an organization, we pride ourselves on the fact that we are radically resident-driven. What that means is that we work alongside our families, trusting that they know better than anyone what it is that they need to be successful. About 2 years ago, I had an epiphany. And for those of you who are leaders, and we all are in this space, you know epiphanies can be dangerous, particularly for our team. But during this epiphany, I realized that despite all of the hard work that we were doing as an organization, despite all of our amazing wraparound programs such as after-school programming, workforce development, health clinics, food pantries, all of the things that we were doing on site within these communities, we were not seeing an impact. We were not moving the needle. There was a disconnect between what our organization was providing and what our families truly need. Being that we pride ourselves on being radically resident-driven, we did what we do. We go out and we had conversations. But this time we asked a very different question. We simply said, what do you need? Time and time again, we heard the same thing. In order for our families to address their biggest needs, they needed cash. Cash for emergencies, cash for groceries, cash for kid activities, cash just so they could breathe. During this time, I heard from Sierra, who talked about the stress that she experienced because she didn't have the $25 her daughter needed to participate in the science fair. And then I heard from Shamika, who talked about how she had to quit her job after hitting a pothole because she did not have the resources to get her car fixed. Our families told us exactly what it was that they need. Our job is to listen. I will say that one more time. When families tell you what they need, you should listen. Our families are telling us daily what it is that they need to be successful. It is our job to be bold and disruptive and address that need. December 10th, 2018, I made the phone call that could change Arlene's life. Upon introducing myself, she immediately started screaming. She knew who I was and she knew why I was calling. I had just informed her that she would be participating in the Magnolia Mothers Trust. After her sobs of joy and her screams of excitement, I asked her why was she so excited. She said, I can go back to school. I needed $1,200 to pay for a GED prep course and to pay for some debt. Now I have that money, I can go back to school. That's right. A small, manageable sum to most of us, $1,200 had become an insurmountable obstacle, separating her from her dreams. Obstacles usurping dreams is exactly why Springboard has launched the Magnolia Mothers Trust. This pilot is providing 20 Springboard mothers $1,000 in cash each month for 12 months to use how they see fit, no strings attached. This is the first guaranteed income pilot in the nation that specifically, strategically, intentionally recognizing the systems that have been put in place targets extremely low-income Black women living in poverty. It is pretty darn radical, and we're really excited. Thank you. A guaranteed income is a no strings attached direct cash benefit. The model provides people with a periodic cash payment delivered unconditionally, regardless of income, resources, or employment status. In addition to the no strings attached aspect that is the Magnolia Mothers Trust, we are mindful to take a two-generational lens. We are coupling this financial services for our mothers with children's savings accounts for their kids, as well as social support training, as well as assistance from a social worker. I would be remiss if I did not say that this model was developed specifically in partnership with our mothers during a 6-month planning period. Taken collectively, we are optimistic that these efforts will afford the women and their kids access to the resources to obtain all of their dreams, whether they be educational successes, economic security, or monthly self-care rituals. For all the innovation that is this pilot, the goal is quite simple: to provide the breathing room necessary to help families actualize their dreams. What innovation will occur without the constant need for survival? Does a guaranteed income allow the freedom to pursue work that provides dignity, not just a paycheck? The ideal of a guaranteed income is bold, yet not new. This ideal has floated around in about political discourse for decades. Leaders from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to Hillary Clinton have already supported the ideal of trusting people and just giving them the cash they need to obtain a basic floor of living. Unconditional cash transfers demonstrate no decrease in labor participation and a significant increase in other quality of life benefits, such as mental and physical health, educational outcomes, parenting, and agency, to name a few. Yet, despite the proven benefits, providing cash directly to poor individuals has often been met with criticism, suspicion, and fear. The thinking goes that people who need financial assistance are not to be trusted, as their financial position reflects a moral failing rather than a societal one. Since welfare reform, extreme poverty, or people earning less than $2 a day, has risen dramatically. This data is indicative of a larger systematic emergency, not a personal failing by those individuals who are experiencing poverty. A few years ago, during my time as an Aspen Fellow, I was introduced to novelist Adichie's TED Talk, The Danger of a Single Story. In this talk, Adichie warns that if we hear only a single story, we risk a critical misunderstanding. Regarding poor people, we have been telling a single story that aligns to the stereotypes that we have become comfortable holding on to. She's just a welfare queen, just somebody's baby mama. They're lazy and they don't want to work. How many of us have heard that? We are only 3 months into this pilot, but the amazing women that we work with are already defying this stereotypical narrative. Arlene, despite having to work long hours and parent her 2 kids, is already enrolled in that GED prep course. She's taking her exam this spring. And there's Tanisha, who has mapped out her plan for home ownership and is working with the local credit union to secure her mortgage. And Tacola, she's excited that for the first time she doesn't have to stress about how she's going to pay her bills. So yes, the fact that the Magnolia Mothers Trust is providing cash and a way out of poverty is important, but it is equally important that we tell the stories of the brave women participating. We know that if we are going to disrupt current financial systems within our social safety net, it will take the strategic weaving of programs directly aligned to those impacted, storytelling to disrupt dangerous narratives, and courageous policies. These ambitious goals cannot be met with a one-year pilot. I am optimistic, not naive. This is why Springboard is working to develop the strategic partnerships and financial resources necessary to execute a much larger project. The goal being to implement a 3-year randomized control study impacting 100 mothers annually. It is my hope that by examining the pilot as a pioneering model of programmatic design that shifts power and influence to the people excluded and oppressed by our current economic and political systems, we can advance a method of policymaking that affirms the human dignity and belonging of us all. Additionally, I am optimistic that in telling the collective stories, policymakers will take notice of all our families are able to accomplish with the breathing room cash affords and begin to rewrite policies impacting our social safety net system. Rewriting policies to better reflect the needs of the families is not so far-fetched. For all of our ability to analyze and critique, we have become rooted in what is rather than what can be. This year has yet to write the story of the Magnolia Mothers Trust, but I am optimistic that our mothers are using this moment to take the breathing room they need. Thank you.